This video is the analysis of the game between Praggnanandhaa and Magnus Carlsen from the Superbet Grand Chess Tour happening in Poland. This is the 7th round of the event and Pragg has the black pieces against Magnus Carlsen. Let's have a look at the game. As you can see from the image below, Pragg and Magnus have a very good camaraderie with each other. They are good friends of each other. Magnus has openly complimented Pragg on being a great player. So it's always fascinating to see both of them fight it out against each other. Magnus, with the white pieces, opens the game with 1 e4. Pragg responds back with e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4. Now, this is known as the Italian bishop c5, castles, knight comes out to f6, d3, and d6. Magnus has adopted an approach in this tournament where he goes for a quick d4. So, for example, here he many times goes h3, then c3, then tries for d4 without really indulging in ideas of bishop g5 or nd2, rook e1, knight f1, knight g3. These maneuvers are also very typical in the Italian, but Magnus is more going for the d4 break. So he went c3, Pragg went a6, making a square for his bishop, a4 gaining space, bishop drops back, and now Magnus played his knight to d2. Black played castles, h3. The h3 in general is useful because it stops the knight from coming to g4, also the bishop to come here. So it's a useful move. h6 was played, and now came the move b4, gaining space. Pragg went for knight e7, and I like this move by Pragg because, the knight on c6 is often dominated by the pawn on c3. If you see, anytime the knight is 2 squares away from the pawn, it cannot move to these squares. So rerouting the knight to g6 is a very good idea here. Okay, so in the game, knight e7 was played, rook went to e1, knight g6, and now Magnus played the move d4. So he's pushed this pawn, and for Pragg, it's a question on how to react. He can keep the pawns as they are here and play his rook here. The other option is he can take, and push his pawn to d5, which is also possible. Or, like he did in the game, just ignore it and try for the d5 move directly. So here with c6, he's trying to play d5 in one go. Bishop went back to f1, and now Pragg played his rook to e8. Queen came out and pawn pushed forward to d5. Very interesting moment in the game, and you will see that all 4 pawns are standing across each other. So I would like you to pause the video here and think, what is the best move for white? And there's only one move here which is good for white, so think it through carefully. Yes, the right move is to take on d5. This is very important because if you play d takes e5, then after knight takes, and rook takes, the problem is, firstly, this is pinned. Secondly, if you come out with your knight to attack the rook, I will take the pawn. And thirdly, you cannot push your pawn because there is a bishop. So clearly taking here is wrong. And by the way, black is threatening to take here, also threatening to take here. So taking on d5 is the correct move. And now for Pragg, it's also very important to take on d4 because otherwise he will simply lose the pawn here. So he takes, rook takes, queen takes, and now Magnus plays a very nice move. Once again, you can think about it. What should white do? This entire idea that Magnus comes up with, because, if you take this pawn, then queen takes c6 is already fine. But also there is d takes c3. and the position is around equal because takes, you can see these two bishops are very, very powerful. So the right move is to push the pawn very strong, and after takes you push the pawn even further, blocking this bishop's path. These pawns are pretty good, and white is going to recover the pawn with knight takes, and then the bishop comes here, and this bishop is on the long diagonal, the bishop comes here. In fact, this position is starting to look very dangerous for Praggnanandhaa. So Pragg now has to play carefully. He plays his knight in the center of the board. Magnus picks up the pawn. And now comes the move a5. And this is what Pragg was banking upon. The fact that he could weaken this c5 pawn where it is attacked from the bishop and knight. He took. And Pragg took back with the pawn. He could also have taken with the queen here, which would have led to an interesting position. I think white would have played his queen up to c3 there. But he took with the pawn. Knight b5. Excellent move here by Magnus. And this is where I think many players would have collapsed against Magnus Carlsen, because he is putting pressure here. And you can notice that white has a majority, 3 pawns versus 2. And his bishop could come to b2, also could come to e3 where it is well placed. The rook can join into the game. So Magnus has a very big positional advantage here. Pragg tried to save the bishop. He went bishop b8 on the long diagonal, trying maybe to threaten queen e5 and a mate here. So bishop b2 also possible here, and very strong was the move rook b1, and maybe Magnus could have played it, but bishop b2 is okay. He took the pawn, and now Magnus played rook e1, bringing his rook to the center, attacking the pawn on e4. Pragg played his bishop out. And here, it's not so easy for white to win material, because if he pushes the pawn forward, then the bishop settles down and attacks the rook. Dark squares get weakened terribly. If he pushes g4, then the f3 square gets weak, so then the knight jumps in and threatens to fork. So all in all, it's not so easy to win this pawn right now. The best move would have been to play knight d6. It's a very tough move to make, because after bishop d6, pawn takes, and if you take on a4 with whichever piece, the queen and the rook, the white queen moves to c5, attacking the bishop, and this d pawn is very strong. So this could have been nice, but he played queen b3, and Pragg now played a very, very strong move, which was... No, Pragg played bishop f4, which is okay, normal move. Queen takes b4, and now maybe the only move to keep the game under control, queen d7. Basically taking control of the open file, and it's a good move to keep the queen there. Magnus offered the trade of queens. He took. Knight takes, attacking the bishop, so there's no time to win this pawn. Bishop d7, and now bishop b5. He took. Pawn takes. Now this pawn is hanging on e4, but very quickly he gets counterplay with rook a2, bishop c3, and now rook a4, threatening to come here, attack the bishop and the pawn. And if you, by the way, take here, rook takes e4, then after rook c4, black will recover back material. So pawn push by Magnus. He came here, and notice how if you take this pawn, the bishop controls the queening square, so it's not really a problem. He played bishop a1, pawn takes pawn, knight takes, and bishop went back, trying to put the bishop to b6. Bishop came here, stopping the bishop from coming to d4. Knight jumped in. Have to be very careful now. Both sides were running very low on time. In fact, Praggnanandhaa was down to I think over here, after king f1, he was down to 1 second on his clock when he made his last move. It's a tough position when you don't have time, because if you are thinking about saving the pawn, white is threatening to take this pawn, which was maybe difficult to do on the last move because of check. And then there is this discovered check that could come in here, very deadly. So this one, now he threatens to take, but f5 runs into check, although the position still remains kind of equal. After knight f5, there is some move rook b4 trying to attack here, but you don't want to play that. Knight e6 was maybe better move to attack this bishop, but Pragg went knight d5, and this allowed Magnus to win a pawn. Now imagine you are at 11 seconds, because there's a 10-second increment per move. You are a pawn down against Magnus. It can get very stressful, but I loved how Pragg wriggled out of it. First king at 7, an important move to stop rook e8 check and the breaking of the pin. So rook went back, and now a very important move that Pragg had to find. You can pause the video and think, what should black do here? Yes, the move is knight b4, because once you take here, I will take with the rook, attacking the bishop and the pawn, and it's equal. So Magnus played bishop e5, and his point is, if you take on c6, I will take on c7, then push b6, and white is winning. But Pragg found another great move, bishop b6, excellent play. And after knight takes, rook takes. Well, now the problem is you can't save the pawn. I'm threatening rook b2. So he had to push the pawn, takes. And at this point, the bishops got traded, and we are in an absolutely equal endgame. And the players agreed to a draw. In this way, Praggnanandhaa kept his cool against, I think, some great play by Magnus, who managed to create the chance in this Italian game. But Pragg was extremely solid, not allowing Magnus to run away with the full point. How are the standings after the 3 days of Rapid? Well, this is what we have. Wei is right now leading with 13 points, Magnus on 12, Pragg on 10, Duda on 9, Shevchenko on 9, Norderbeck on 8, Arjun on 8, Gukesh 7, Anish 7, and Vincent 7. So this is how the standings look. Now we have 18 rounds of Blitz, so 18 points at stake to determine the winner of the Rapid and Blitz. I think anyone can still win this, but clearly Wei and Magnus are the favorites, with Pragg having good chances. I will join you guys soon today, and we will be following this Blitz section together. Until then, see you. Bye bye.